Hi and welcome to this fourth video about genes and genetic testing. I'm going to continue looking at exam questions. So this question, explain how pre-implantation genetic diagnosis is performed to detect cystic fibrosis. So pre-implantation genetic diagnosis is related to IVF, and so obviously a description of IVF or how that's done. So in vitro fertilisation, samples of sperm and eggs are taken from the mother and father and are then fertilised outside the body, and hence in vitro. They then, the DNA of these embryos is then analysed to ensure that there's not the CFTR gene present or the damaged CFTR allele present, and therefore only the ones that are healthy are reimplanted. And then discuss either one ethical or social issue relating to the use of pre-implantation genetic diagnosis. And so there are a number of different ones that you could use here. So any one of who has the right to decide whether the test should be performed, and therefore there could be disagreements over the next step, or potentially talking about whether the embryo has rights or the medical costs involved. It could also be referring to the confidentiality of the parents or the child, and the idea that some other abnormality may be found. The paternal DNA doesn't necessarily match, and so issues arising from that, and also which other family members are informed about this type of information. Whether you get a false negative or a false positive, and therefore there could be a problem in the future to do with employment, to do with insurance companies, and therefore whether you could get insurance or get employment. And finally, whether the actual process could actually cause damage, and therefore the embryo has rights, and therefore by destroying the embryo, obviously it's unethical. Some people might equate it to murder. So this question, the cystic fibrosis is a genetic disease that can affect many body systems, including digestive. In a carrier of this disorder, pre-implantation genetic diagnosis can be used to detect the presence of an allele for cystic fibrosis. Explain how cystic fibrosis affects the digestive system. And so what you have to link is, how does the disease cause the symptoms or cause problems in your digestive areas, and particularly in areas like the small intestine and around the pancreas. So if you start off by referring to the fact that the CFTR gene or the channel doesn't function properly, and therefore it causes a production of the thick sticky mucus. From there you have to refer to this mucus can block the pancreatic duct, or has issues with the pancreas itself, which you can gain marks from. The pancreas is obviously a gland that's involved in secreting enzymes into the small intestine, and so you can talk about the fact that you can't get the enzymes to the small intestine. This therefore reduces the level of digestion, and therefore you get less absorption. From this point you can develop things like malnutrition, and finally if you think about some of the problems, if it's related to the pancreas, obviously the pancreas is related to things like sugar regulation, so it could lead to issues like diabetes or controlling your blood sugar levels. If you look at the question carefully, it clearly says explain how cystic fibrosis affects the digestive system. So you don't need to go into, for instance at this point, you don't need to go into how the CFTR protein not working causes the thick mucus. It's simply asking for how the disease causes problems in the digestive system. So simply by saying you produce thick mucus, and then you can talk about the symptoms from there.